This is Dr. David Pomeroy, your host on ADHD Focus. I wanted to remind you that the show is not intended to be a recommendation for diagnosis or treatment of any condition for any specific person. Please consult your mental health professional or doctor managing your ADHD or mental health issues about any diagnosis or treatment-related information that you hear on the show. Refer your ADHD provider to the show if he or she would like more information. Today, our topic is how are you sabotaging yourself and your ADHD? What are the top things that are making things actually worse? My guest is Jeff Copper, an ADHD coach extraordinaire who has his practice Dig Coaching and does podcasts and blogs and all kinds of good things. Jeff, welcome to the program.
Grateful to have you. Grateful to have me on. I'm thankful to have this opportunity, and I think we're gonna have a little bit of fun today, kind of talking about some really serious stuff in a lighthearted way to get people's attention so they can kind of manage their ADD.
Yeah, I think there are a number of strategies I think people think of. Oh yeah, I've got to get organized and have a whiteboard and one thing and another, but the basics are the foundation to all these other things we do.
Absolutely.
So I'd say the top two basics maybe are sleep and getting enough good sleep and nutrition. What do you eat, but also when and what kinds of things.
I totally agree with you. Like, when you think about it, if you're sleep deprived, your executive function that's taxed is already that much more taxed, and so any system in the world is going to be difficult for you to do if you're sleep deprived. One of the things that I do every once in a while with a neurotypical is I'll ask them about time where they were up 24 hours or something like that, and I basically start asking how were you functioning in that moment, and they're like, well, I'm having a hard time focusing, a hard time making a decision. I'm like, well, yeah. That's what sleep deprivation can do you. So if you've got ADHD, why would you make it worse by depriving yourself of sleep, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, go ahead.
I think it's something that can be it is unconscious. It slips in there, and I always ask, how are you sleeping? And a number of people come up with a rationalization. Well, I need some time for myself, or I've got all these things to do, and I get thinking about all the stuff that I need to do, and so I just start doing it, and I get kind of lost in doing them. Whereas making the conscious choice that sleep is important, what are the steps I can do to make sure I get a solid, I'd say at least 7.5 and better 8 hours of sleep?
So, that one of the things that I've learned over my years of coaching is, when it comes to sleep, you have rationally, I should go to bed at this time, I should get up at this time, and I find that people struggle to self-regulate to do that. We talk about sleep hygiene, we talk about stuff like that, but when I'm working with clients, I basically ask them, what's your brain entertaining itself with at night? Mm-hmm. And the YouTube is a big one right now. People will sit down, they'll get onto that thing, and I tell people, do you realize these people, there's a computer studying your behavior, and they know exactly what's going on. They're going to serve you something up that's going to be like fun and entertaining. And the issue with sleep, I learned from Dr. Olivardia, is basically your brain has to surrender itself to sleep. And if you're dealing with something that's fun and exciting and stimulated, who the hell would want to go to sleep? I talk about, the experts tell me that when you put your head on the pillow, between then and the time you fall asleep, it should take about 15 minutes. And that's like the 15 minutes of the most boring time of the day, and people with ADHD, they can't stand it, so they leap out of bed and they go entertain themselves. And so the issue is not getting up in the morning, it's actually going to sleep at night. Thoughts on that?
Yeah. And I think it's avoiding going to sleep because either, and of course, this is a time when if you take medications, they aren't working anymore.
Yep.
And there's always something more interesting than lying down and going to sleep. And like you say, entertaining yourself. Oh, I'm going to watch one more Netflix or one more YouTube. You don't even think about doing it. That little circle comes on and it says, oh, play now.
Sucker, keep watching me, keep watching me. So one of my things as a coach is I work with people and say, you know, you got to be conscious and intentional about this. And if you really think about it, what you need is something at night to engage your attention that is interesting enough to capture attention, but not too interesting where you won't surrender yourself to sleep. So what that would look like, and again, what will work for one person is different from everybody, but I've had some success sometimes with adult coloring books, where you're sitting there, you're coloring the dots, or I've had some people that just doodle. One woman I remember, she turned all the lights in her house off, so it was all pitch black, I mean completely black, and she had like one of those minor flashlights on her head, so it was like a spotlight, and she would go around doing busy work, like dishes and laundry, stuff that engaged her mind a little bit and kept it occupied, but it would surrender itself. And so it's kind of like finding that thing is like a Post-it note. It's sticky enough to stick to the wall, but not too sticky where it'll rip the paint off. Go ahead.
I think the trap with some people is, in terms of the busy work, is more I have to get this done. I didn't get the dishes done, and I have to have this ready, and they get caught up in the doing and have to, and that's helpful to do that, but keeping in mind what's your ultimate goal is to get the sleep, so the next day you feel better. You're able to do those things more easily. They aren't such a drag on your energy, because when your energy's down, like you say, you aren't putting the energy you need into making decisions and choosing to do what you need to, instead of diverting yourself because you're tired and, well, why not? I call the McDonald's effect. I deserve a break today.
So you bring up a good point, because a lot of times people are doing the busy work at night, but there's another realm of here is you've got the people that call themselves a night owl when they're sitting down and they're doing some heavy executive functioning work. And one of the things that I try to emphasize is that when you're going to do a task that is exceptionally effortful, thinking inside your head is basically loading information, kind of like a computer. You got to boot it all up so you have all the tools to work on it. And if you're constantly being interrupted, you keep having to reboot your screen, reboot. So a lot of times people, they'll find themselves doing the work at night because they're not interrupted. And there's not exciting things. So like during the day, it's like they don't want to miss out on something. They wait till later in the evening, and they're getting this stuff done because they're not interrupted, so their mind can sit there and not have to restart. And the thing about this is, if you don't have the self-awareness, is you'll stay up doing that type of stuff to get the things done and become sleep deprived. Whereas if you understand the reason you can do it at night is because you're uninterrupted without those distractions, and you can replicate it during the day, you could actually get something done and not be sleep deprived at night, as opposed to letting everybody come in and stop your thinking process. Because at the end of the day, ADHD is an executive function impairment. Thinking inside your head is impaired. Interruptions are harder from you, and during the day, if you're allowing those interruptions to come in, you don't really have any thinking time. So you're moving it to the evening and creating a sleep deprivation problem because you're not consciously managing that during the day. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it quite definitely is the consciously managing it. I like the kind of looking at the background. What reason are you doing that? And again, people come up with all kinds of things to rationalize. Well, I can't keep my door closed, and I've got to be able to be available to my team or to my kids or whatever. Well, there are ways to get around that, and making that conscious. I want to make getting to sleep and I guess helping my brain work better.
Yep.
Which thing, because that's, yes, it's sleep, and that's also getting some intentional physical activity and eating right, and not just having some junk foods so that I can stay up and work. And you're having chips and salsa or.
So let's transition into that, because I know diet's a big deal for you. And, one of the things that you sabotage yourself is when you're sleep deprived and you're tired, you instinctively seek out foods that are going to kind of give you energy. And if you take a look at junk foods, things that are really high in carbohydrates and sugar are going to attract you because they feel good in that minute. But it's like, hey, sucker, come over here, because at the end of the day, that stuff will kick in and give you high, but there's a crash when it's over with.
Yeah. Yep.
And when you start to really think about those foods, and fast food in particular, they're designed to appeal to your primitive brain. So as you get sucked into those, you get these highs and lows of crashes. And I know we want to get into supplements in a second, because you're a big fan of that, or it makes some sense. But you get into that stuff as opposed to like having protein, because protein is really good for manufacturing neurotransmitters. So as I've learned, protein for breakfast is not breakfast, it's a medication. Like you think about it as your medications for your brain to work optimally. And having protein scattered around the house so you can eat during the day, because another issue is like, you have that big high and you take your meds and you're not hungry through the day, and then you crash at the end and you really prey to this stuff. And the idea here really is you get lured into this stuff as opposed to saying, listen, I got to get up in the morning, I'm going to have my protein bar next to my medication, so I'm going to take that first thing, and then I'm going to take think of protein and breakfast and lunch as medication, not food. You have that during the day. So in the evenings, you're not as starved for some of that stuff, because we have research now that suggests people with ADHD's life expectancy is 8 to 20 years less than everybody. And one of the reasons is people with ADHD are drawn to a Western diet, which is higher incidence of cardiac, higher incidence of diabetes, et cetera. So going back to this stuff is you're getting sucked back into this stuff. And if you're sleep deprived, you're more yearning for some of that stuff. So it just cascades. So thoughts on this? Your
brain has learned. You learn that, I get a rush when I have a soda that's got a lot of sugar in it, or I'm going to just have a snack and it's something like caramel corn that again has the sugar, and you kind of feel full and you get that initial rush. Maybe that's more tempting at night because your meds aren't there, whereas the protein takes longer to break down, and it leads to some carbs and energy, but you get this steady level of it instead of the jump from the sugar and then insulin comes out and it drops everything down. They get that crash. And kids think of, or people think of kids, maybe they have some breakfast and then they aren't hungry for lunch, and they get home from school and they're grumpy and they have a headache, and adults do the same thing, but they don't even realize it. Or they're, I have to have something to eat, and so they go to the snack machine and get something. And one thing, a lot of people think of protein, I have to have eggs and bacon. And there's this concept of complementary proteins. So there are, I think it's 17 essential amino acids. We can't make them from something else. We have to eat them. And if milk has, for instance, 10, I'm just throwing that number out there, and whole wheat grains or whole wheat toast has 9, some of them are different, you put the two together, you get all 17. So if you have some milk and whole wheat toast and peanut butter on it, that's a complementary protein set.
Yes.
Or you have cheese and, again, some grains or whole wheat stuff. So doesn't have to be as boring as you have to have eggs every morning.
Absolutely. Talking about brain food now.
Yeah, right, exactly. The brain food that keeps you going on a steady level. You don't have this up and down of, sugar stuff. And there are supplements in there. They don't necessarily they don't take the place of protein, but they can help with some of the aspects of the ADHD brain, like tyrosine. L-tyrosine is the metabolic